Yes, I am back. The rumors of my demise, or at least the pleadings to Satan that my detractors may have sent out, hoping that I was gone forever, well, it didn't amount to shit. Now, in case you didn't see the postings that I've done over the past couple weeks here on YouTube, I should point out that currently it is 19 March 2024. I've been a little preoccupied over the last month and a half. Part of it was complications due to cancer. You know, I haven't exactly kept this hidden that I had pancreatic cancer years ago. Well, every so many months, I get side effects of that cancer. Different things inside my body doesn't quite work the way it's supposed to at that point, and it can last anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. And it could be, you know, there's a small list of different things that regularly happen when that occurs. Different things going wrong in different parts of my body. So I made it through that issue. Then as soon as I got done with that, I went back to work, and then I was transferred to an easier job at work, easier on my back. For those of you that may have forgotten or aren't aware of this, I injured my spine in 2023, like May, June time period. That resulted in me having to have surgery in January of 2024. Well, I'm still having issues with my spine. There's still a bit too much pain and that stuff on occasion. So at work, I was transferred to an easier position, an easier job tasking. But one of the issues with that easier job tasking, it allows me too much time to think, for my mind to wander. And this time of year is not a great time of year for me. This time of year is when I was diagnosed with cancer both times. It was, you know, early in the year. This is also the time of year when I went to war 20 some years ago. And, you know, other things over the years that go wrong during my life typically happens during the first few months of the year. So this ain't a great time for me. You know, usually what I do is I take my mind off of all of that by concentrating on either videos or concentrating on only work. And, you know, it's just, I was remembering the past way too much over the past few weeks here. Some people did offer to talk with me and that stuff, talk through my issues and stuff. And, you know, there's a few people I did reach out to that know me fairly well, and we talked through on some of the stuff. So it happens. Okay, you serve long enough in the military, you're going to have those things that didn't go quite right, and you deal with it any way you can. So, and I usually deal with it by working as hard as I can, which with my old position at my work, that wasn't an issue. This new position, there's just, you know, there's too much downtime for it to allow me to think on stuff. But I am back now. I was going to start doing some videos last week, but if you didn't see the community post I had put up on YouTube, the time that I was going to start doing videos again, I contacted Combat Cameraman, and then he informed me that at his place, they were dealing with a strep outbreak. So for my safety, he did not come over to my place to do videos. So I basically put it off for about another week, and hopefully Combat Cameraman will be back tomorrow on Thursday, and maybe we can start in on some videos. I still have some that I wrote up literally a month and a half ago that we have not done yet, that they were ready to be done. We just didn't get to them because of the complications with the cancer stuff. And really, I and Combat Cameraman got to sit down now, go over those notes, and try to remember how the hell we were even going to do those videos. And then get everything set up, whether it's putting it on a whiteboard, setting up a terrain model, or printing out pictures, whatever was required for those videos. I do have some easier guerrilla cooking videos for doing. It's not so much full-on recipes. This is actually, you know, real quick, simple things that we could do in the military. We're out in the field, you know, during an exercise or whatever. We just reached into our rucksack, pulled out a couple cans of something, and you could mix it up inside your canteen cup type things. So we will get to those recipes as I get the materials for them, because I found out when I looked last week that Combat Cameraman had apparently helped himself to the materials I had gotten for those videos already, and he did admit to me that he ate them. So I have to get new ingredients, and hopefully we can get to that stuff. Now, this will be a rant and random thoughts video. The title for it, I got no fucking clue. I just got a few things written down here that I want to go over. One of them is a warning, and another one is one of these what the fuck is wrong with them type things. So first off, let's go into the warning. Over the last few weeks here, there has been a massive uptick in violent rhetoric from the media and members of government against Trump and conservatives and patriots in this country. People like Hakeem Jeffries, Maxine Waters, AOC have done comments about how Trump wants a civil war. He's trying to provoke you to go to war. Let's not hold back. Let's give it to him. Let's give him what he wants. And, you know, they're just really stoking it up, talking about how people who didn't support Biden, people who don't support the deep state, you know, they're the real enemy. They're not even human. They should be disposed of. They should be gotten rid of. And everything that Trump's doing is against the law because, you know, they're finding out about all the corruption and the money laundering and all the stuff that's been going on. Elon Musk and his little Doge team, Department of Government Efficiency, has found over $500 billion in funding that, quite frankly, it went to nowhere. This was money that was going to fake projects, going right into people's pockets. You know, they want to say that it's, you know, $500 billion, but people that are actually following the numbers more closely are saying it's actually over $1 trillion they've found so far. And they haven't even gotten into the Department of Defense records yet. For those of you that forget, on September 10th of 2001, you had Rumsfeld come out, talk about how they had over $1 trillion in spending that they couldn't account for. And then that was completely overshadowed because the next morning, September 11th, oh my God, we got attacked by people from caves. You know, they ran aircraft into buildings and all kinds of stuff, and they were pulling off maneuvers that literally would have ripped the wings off of the planes as they're going in to hit stuff. If you don't believe me, look up the stuff on the supposed plane that hit the Pentagon. People have pointed out that if a airliner, like they say, had hit the Pentagon, it did the maneuvering that they say it was supposed to have done, and this was supposed to have been done by some goat fuckers out of caves in Afghanistan. You know, if an experienced pilot couldn't pull off those maneuvers at those speeds, but we were supposed to believe that that was a airliner that hit the Pentagon so hard that it literally, you know, evaporated the majority of the fuselage of the plane, and there was no bodies and no baggage or other wreckage. But if you take into account the possibility of a cruise missile, that would explain the amount of wreckage that was seen and the particular damage patterns that were seen and the speeds and the abilities to maneuver, and, you know, but hey, we're not supposed to think about that. Even back in 2001, a lot of us were wondering as we were watching on September 11th, looking at that footage, we were going, where the fuck's the plane? You're saying a plane hit the fucking building, where the fuck's the wreckage? I mean, we seen the video footage of it happening in New York, the planes hitting the Twin Towers. Fine, we'll give you that. We admit that one. But when you get into the Pentagon and you remember, hey, some of you have forgotten this one. Remember there was a plane that supposedly hit the ground so fucking hard in Pennsylvania that it caused the wings to fold up like an F-14 Tomcat? And the plane went into the ground so fucking far and so fucking fast that it literally sucked all the wreckage into the ground and all the baggage and all that stuff, and all we had was a smoking crater with a few bits of trash around it that everyone looked at and said, gee, this doesn't really match what you're describing. You know, a lot of us asked questions on that in 2001, and we were told, hey, shut up, we're at war, let's go kick some ass. So, you know, hey, that's what we did. You know, whatever. Young, dumb, full of cum back then. And we went overseas and we kicked ass. And we kicked ass wholesale. We were very good at it. But back on topic here, you have the Democrats, which are calling for violence against the people that beat them in the election. And as I said, they're really going after Musk and his Doge team because of the money laundering, the outright, let's just call it, they're raiding the Treasury and they were stealing hand over fist. You know, I have a feeling once Doge actually gets into the Pentagon budget, you're going to see that $500 billion, you know, shoot up to well past 10 trillion. That has disappeared over the last 20 years during the war on terrorism. Money that just, it's gone. No one knows where it went. Projects for equipment that the troops never got. But the money went to something, went to someone's bank account. Where did it go? We don't know. Oh, fuck. But you also have people on social media are going nuts. You know, they're out there screaming that something needs to be done to Don, to Elon, and JD. And, well, what do they mean by something? I think we all know. We're talking about they want someone to go out there and kill those three individuals. And I've seen a lot of these videos. There's more and more of them going up, and these purple-headed frickin' freaks are getting more and more deranged, more and more violent. They're out there saying that someone needs to take the bullet for them, you know, because they're not willing to go out and do it because they're not capable, they're not strong enough, or they don't own a firearm, or, you know, they're a dance teacher, or they teach at a public school, which means that they can't go out and do what needs to be done, they say. You know, this rhetoric is just, it's getting worse and worse every day. People in media calling for violence. People in government calling for violence. You have nut jobs on social media calling for violence. And what's end up happening? Oh shit, we're seeing fucking violence now. We are seeing Tesla dealerships being attacked almost nightly across North America. It's not just in the United States, it's happening up in Canada also. On top of that, video footage came out today of Timmy Waltz out of Minnesota. He's trying to remain, politically relevant, because maybe he thinks that his cum drinking ass, might become the candidate in 2028. I don't fucking know. But he did a thing where he's talking about on his phone. He uploaded some app on there which shows him where Teslas are located across the country. Who's the people that bought Teslas and stuff. And you could click on the little icon, for a Tesla, and you can get the information as to where that Tesla is, who bought it, what their address is. And the thing is, when you click on that little app, it brings up an icon of a Molotov cocktail when you click on the address. So, he's kind of telling you what he expects people to do, because he was talking about people need to start going after the people that bought the Teslas, because they're just as bad as Elon. Look past the fact that he's an actual African American. Literally, he was born in South Africa, grew up in South Africa, and came to the United States. He is more African American than any baseball or basketball American you will see in the inner city of Chicago. Now, we also have, for those of you that may have missed this, there is a huge amount of swatting attacks that are going on. This has happened so much now that the Attorney General Bondi has brought it up. The head of DHS, Kristi Noem, has brought it up. And for those of you that aren't aware of this, what's going on is people are calling the local law enforcement for where well-known conservative talk show hosts live at, conservative reporters, well-known Trump supporters, and they're calling the local cops in those areas. They don't necessarily live in those areas. There's reports that, you have someone, say, in Arizona calling the cops in Texas. And they're calling in reports that, oh my God, I'm hearing shouting next door. I'm hearing gunshots. I think my neighbor, Owen Schroyer from InfoWars, I think he just killed somebody. You better get over there. I think he's yelling that he's going to commit suicide after he's done killing everyone. So then the cops show up. They're expecting an actual active shooter situation. And what's really going on is these people aren't doing shit. They're at home watching movies. They're sleeping, having sex with their wife or their girlfriend, whatever it is. And then the cops start stacking on the door, getting ready to kick it open because they believe this person is holding someone hostage or killing someone. Now, Kristi Noem did a press conference here a few hours ago at the time of taping this, and she said that the Department of Homeland Security is currently tracing phone numbers and tracking locations of the phones that have been used to make these phone calls. Now, some of this stuff apparently is really sophisticated. I was listening to InfoWars today, and they were talking about this because multiple InfoWars reporters and Alex Jones himself have had swatting incidents over the last week to 2 weeks here. And they're talking to other people that are reporting it, TV show hosts, radio show hosts, and the information they're getting from law enforcement, some of these calls, the ones that are making them are actually using AI to mimic the voices of the person that's being swatted. So let's say, and I'm just going to throw this out there because I know he's dead and that stuff, but it'll give you a good visual on this. They used the voice of Rush Limbaugh. And he calls the cops talking about how he's going to kill himself, he's going to kill his wife, he's going to do this, he's going to do that, and, you know, so on and so forth. They're using AI, taking the audio from their shows to create the dialogue for those phone calls and then sending those calls to the local police department. And the cops are aware that some of these calls aren't right because if they ask questions, they don't get a response. You know, it seems like it's recorded and all that stuff, which gives them a tip-off. But they still have to react to the call like it is a legitimate shooter situation. So what that is happening then, you're putting the cops in danger along with the person who's being swatted, because the cops could show up at the person's property. They're expecting an active shooter. This person potentially could be looking in their cameras, their security cameras, or they get a notice that, hey, there's movement outside on their security cameras, and then they go grab their firearm to go see what's going on. They look outside, they see bright lights at them, people with guns, just noise. And, you know, the person, you know, does what you would expect. Maybe the cops see that firearm in a person's hands and then you hear gun, 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 and then people start shooting. You know, the person starts shooting back and then you have dead cops and the dead person who's being swatted. For the leftists that are doing these phone calls, that is a win-win to them. That's why they're doing this. But it is, you know, an act of terrorism. They are literally committing terrorism, trying to get people killed by calling in fake information. So there are some of these people that are being swatted. They're contacting people they know closer to the White House, you know, in the administration, not inside the Oval Office, but bringing up to them that, hey, this needs to be declared domestic terrorism. These people, when they're caught, it needs to be known that they're going to go to jail for at least 10 years or 25 years for attempted murder. And it needs to be federal terrorism charges. Reportedly, some of the people who have been swatted have been killed. Not everyone has lived through it. Not every one of them has cooperated with the police because they knew the situation was a setup. Some of them have gone through and started shootouts with the cops or returned fire at people running in their yard with weapons. They didn't see police on their uniforms. Who knows the situation because they're dead now. And you got people that are they're getting fitted for wings. Now, something that apparently happened over this last week here. If you're not aware of this, last week, there was an InfoWars reporter who was murdered down in Austin, Texas. Now, they don't know if this was a carjacking gone wrong, if this was a targeted assassination, they're not sure. The reporter that was killed was on a Ukrainian hit list because this reporter had been putting out reports that were derogatory of Zelensky and the conduct of the Ukrainian government. So they're not fully sure, you know, what's the circumstances for this reporter being killed. This reporter's name is Jamie White. Now, over the past few days here, at a bunch of these swatting events, after nothing happens, no one gets killed, the person who was swatted, a few hours later, gets a knock on the door. Pizza! Domino's or whatever local pizza place shows up. They have an order of pizzas for them. It's supposed to be cash payment on delivery. And the name of the person who bought the pizzas was Jamie White. Reportedly, all of the reporters at InfoWars that have been swatted over the last week, their calls and the pizzas arriving afterwards are in the name of Jamie White. And reportedly, a bunch of others across the country, the same situation is going on. So, now, I brought up Ukraine. Let's jump into Ukraine. Actually, let's stay away from it and not poke it with a 20-foot stick. Let's stay back and just, toss hand grenades at it, personally, is my thought. But for those of you that did not hear, Tuesday the 18th, Trump and Putin came up with a ceasefire deal. 30-day ceasefire on the battlefields in Ukraine and around Kursk. But, let's admit it, Ukraine has lost Kursk. The troops that are still alive that have been cut off from Ukraine should just outright surrender. Okay, you're not going to get rescued. There isn't going to be some magical political deal which is going to keep you alive. Lay down your arms and surrender. That's the only way you're going to live through this war. Now, reportedly, this deal wasn't completely ignoring Ukraine. Ukraine had told Trump last week what they would agree to for a ceasefire. Trump, talking to Putin on the phone yesterday, basically gave those conditions to Putin. Putin accepted some, wouldn't accept others. But he did agree to a 30-day ceasefire. As part of this ceasefire, the United States is supposed to stop sending weapons and military aid to Ukraine. Humanitarian aid sounds like can still keep going. But we all know humanitarian aid does not exist in Ukraine. It's just a way to funnel money to people that are embezzling it. Russia had agreed that they will stop attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Ukraine is supposed to do the same thing. Ukraine is also supposed to stop forced mobilizations, aka press gangs grabbing people off the streets, tossing them in the back of vehicles, taking them to a military base, processing them into the military, giving them 48 hours worth of basic training, and then shoving them up in the front lines. That was a request from Putin. Why? Because those soldiers with 2 days worth of training, at most 5 days, they last only a few hours in the front line. So let's think about humanitarian here and just leave them out of it. Now, right afterwards that the news came out on this, Zelensky, the little gay muppet, and yes, I do mean it, he is fucking gay. There's plenty of videos of him doing extremely gay pornographic shit before he became the president of Ukraine. Well, the cocaine Fuhrer, the gay leprechaun, the little muppet, he said that Ukraine would not agree to the ceasefire, that he doesn't believe that Putin wants to end the war, so he's not even going to entertain the thought. He's not going to sit down for a ceasefire deal. He's not going to talk peace. The only way he's going to talk peace is if Russia surrenders to Ukraine. And then, not long after that, Ukraine went back on their part of the ceasefire deal, and they launched multiple drones into Russia to attack energy infrastructure. In particular, there was a tank farm that was connected to the Caspian pipeline. It transfers oil from railroad cars, puts it in storage tanks, and then sends the oil through the pipeline to the ships or wherever it's supposed to go for shipping out. Ukraine attacked the tank farm, set it on fire. Didn't destroy all of it. The Russians that were there were able to get the fire put out, but there was some pretty bad damage. Russia, on the other hand, once Putin agreed to that ceasefire, and that no attack on energy infrastructure. He actually ordered the Russian military to destroy their own drones, which were before the stuff with the Ukraine attack happened. He ordered his troops to stop their drones that were already en route to hit Ukrainian energy infrastructure, hitting power plants, take farms, and so forth. And reportedly, the Russian military actually used their air defense to shoot down some of their own drones. Ones they couldn't get with their air defense, they dispatched their own fighter jets and shot them down before they reached their targets. But even though Russian did that, showing that they were serious, a few hours later, Ukraine went through, said, fuck you, we don't want a ceasefire, we want the war to continue, and they started attacking stuff in Russia. Now, the U.S. reportedly is halting weapons and munitions shipments to Ukraine. However, the White House did say today that they will not stop intelligence going from U.S. intelligence services to the Ukrainian military. That will still keep going on, but the weapons are supposed to be on hold. In response to this, Starmer in England said that England, the United Kingdom, will pick up the slack and make up for that difference from what the United States was sending. How the hell he's going to do that, I don't know, because Britain really doesn't have shit left in their arsenals. They've already emptied them out and sent stuff to Ukraine. The only way they can pick up where the U.S. is leaving off is if they literally disarm their own troops and send the equipment straight there. Because they don't have a defense industry that can... I mean, let's be serious. They have no defense industry anymore. That stuff's gone. Good God. So, the stuff in Ukraine is still a fucking mess. A ceasefire was agreed to by the Russians and the Ukrainians, reportedly, because it's a lot of the stuff they asked for. But Zelensky has said, fuck you, I want more money, let's keep the war going. Truthfully, right now, if someone in Ukraine is hearing this stuff in the video, surrender. Seriously, there's no reason to keep fighting. You guys are not going to push the Russians out of Ukraine. And the territories that the Russians have troops in have already said they want to join Russia. They don't want to be part of Ukraine. Why? Because the fucking Ukrainians were massacring ethnically Russian civilians in those areas since 2014. Hence why the civilians in those areas in the eastern part of what was Ukraine have been joining militias to fight alongside the Russians. Not fight the Russians, but fight alongside them as allies. Which brings us into our next little topic, militia laws. And I'm going to take another drink here. Now, I posted on Telegram here a couple days ago a new video from a channel called Awaken with JP. Funny guy, I like a lot of what he does. But he did a video here a couple days ago of a stereotype militiaman. This person was racist to the hilt, paranoid as hell. He was every stereotype of a militiaman that you hear put out by people in the media and people in government. Now, I posted, and I'm not the only one, I posted a comment in there that this is a stereotype, this is not the way we actually are. And that I just happen to have a militia channel on YouTube here. I know what I'm talking about. Well, I had people right off the bat start attacking me saying, you know, that's exactly what the militia is. The militia is unjustified, they're illegal, blah, 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 blah. We'll leave the video as it is, okay? Now, militias, are they illegal? No. So, what do I have to back this up? First off, you have the militia clause in the Second Amendment. If you don't know what I'm talking about, actually read the Second Amendment. That whole, first clause in there about the defense of the country, yeah, that's the militia clause before you even get to the right of the people to keep and bear arms. You had the militia clause in there. That establishes the militia according to the Constitution. You also have what are referred to as the militia acts. Some of these were immediately after the Constitution were signed. Some of them go over the next 100+ years. The last militia act I came across was sometime in the early 1900s. But under the militia acts and state laws, all 50 states have laws which mirror very closely the federal laws. But the federal laws in relation to militia states that there is two types of militias in this country. You have the organized militia and the unorganized militia. The organized militia refers to the National Guard, Reserve Forces, and Naval Reserve. Those are specifically mentioned in there as organized militia. Now, the unorganized militia, this is where people like me fall under. The unorganized militia is made up of all able-bodied males who can legally own a firearm between the ages of, and it's different by the state, 15 to 50 or 16 to 60 or 15 to 60. And there's also one of the federal laws, it says 18 to 45. All able-bodied males who can legally own a firearm are part of the unorganized militia. There is no restriction to those able-bodied males from forming groups for training. There is no law against that. I know some of you are probably screaming, yes there is, yes there is, yes there is. That's paramilitary. I'll get into that. Under federal laws, in the militia acts, the unorganized militia is required to get together to quote-unquote drill. Drill, in the terminology used during that time period when those acts were created in the late 1700s to mid 1800s, drilling meant training. So what would that mean for nowadays? It would mean going to the range, doing target practice. It would mean doing field exercise, going out to the field, training on survival, training on patrolling. It would mean training in first aid, emergency response, all those things that militias across the country do to be prepared if something were to occur. Now, the unorganized militia is unpaid. They can get paid during a national emergency. In order for an unorganized militia to be paid during a recognized national emergency, they have to be called up by one of three levels: your local sheriff, your state governor, or according to federal laws, the President of the United States. And then when you are called up, you are mobilized by one of those elements. The militia is required under federal law to be paid the same as a comparable rank in the active duty military during the time of their mobilization. The last mobilization that I know of the militia was right after World War II during a strike where, I don't remember what state it was, one of the state governors mobilized the militia and deployed them to face down the strikers, and the mobilized militia was paid for that purpose. That they have not been called up since. But according to federal laws, all able-bodied men in this country who can legally own a firearm are a member of the unorganized militia, and you are actually required to train. But it's not really enforced, obviously. They tried doing the opposite, telling you that you can't train, that it's against the law. Actually, the law states you're required to train if you are part of a militia. That's federal law. And more than likely state law also, because the state laws reflect the federal laws. Now, paramilitaries. Under federal and state laws, a militia can only become illegal if they fall under the category as a paramilitary and they're doing essentially mercenary work. Or if that militia breaks the law, like really egregiously, then they also lose their protections under federal and state laws. Now, a paramilitary is defined as a military force that is paid, not part of an organized military, meaning they're not part of the National Guard, they're not part of the Army, they're not a Marine, in the Marines, Air Force, Space Force, any of them. They are separate from that stuff. They are paid and they conduct missions as a mercenary force. If you do that, then you are a paramilitary, and that is against the law. I read this stuff a lot over the years. I don't have it memorized word for word, but I do remember a lot of the points that were listed in the different laws, different acts in my state and also at the federal level. So, militias are not illegal. You are allowed to be a part of a militia, but they do have to accept you into the organization, okay? We do have rules, a lot of militias do, against racist activity. We also have rules against planning or doing illegal activity. Why? Because that reflects on the rest of the group and can get all of them removed from that protected category under federal law and puts them in potentially that paramilitary category if there's money involved. There's reasons why the Department of Justice regularly infiltrates militias and tries to get them to do illegal activity, because as soon as they do that illegal activity, they lose their protections and they can be rounded up and potentially branded domestic terrorists and all that crap. If you don't do that stuff in that unit, you are following the laws and you're perfectly legal. You do not need to be registered with your state government. Nowhere in the laws, federal, that I have read, or state, is it in there stating that a militia must be registered with the government. And even if a state law is passed saying it must be registered with the state government, the federal laws overrule that. That's the supremacy clause. The federal laws say nothing about registering with the government. So, no requirement for registering a militia with the state government in order to make it legal. You can get together, you can organize, you can train. And as long as you do not pay your members, you do not reimburse them for being there, you are well within legal protections under federal law. So, now, why am I showing this stuff? Well, I'm actually considering doing a video on the caching and feeding the force, bringing the stuff together, and, you know, actually going more into the numbers for what to plan for like group settings and that type of stuff. And I still want to point out that with the way things are going now, with the leftists really going nuts, you need to concentrate on all this type of stuff. Your basic living stuff from day to day. Your food, your way to prepare it and eat it, and survival materials, the wool blanket. Now, one thing I want to point out is the thing you are preparing for may not necessarily be a civil war. It may not necessarily be an invasion. The logistics that you put together does need to be very heavy on the food and medical aspect, because it's more than likely the event that you would have to dip into your supplies for is not going to be combat related. It's going to be something else. It could potentially be a real pandemic. Think of the Black Plague from the Middle Ages. During the Black Plague, as it was burning its way across Europe, you had towns that literally walled themselves off, closed the gates to the outside world, and all they had was what was inside those walls. So you could be in a situation where you're going to need as much food as possible, and you may have visitors, friends and family. Well, they need to be able to eat stuff, and you need to provide them some basic stuff so that they can stay warm as they're trying to sleep at night. Something also that's really been gnawing at me is the event that we prepare for may not be what we expect. It could be something like the tribulation, the biblical tribulation, the final 7 years before the end of days, before the second coming of Christ to earth. Now, I have posted a bunch of movies over on BitChute about this. Things like Left Behind, Omega Code, A Thief in the Night, and there's a few others. I will try to put links to those movies in the description of the video here, in case you want to go watch some of them. But in the tribulation time period, because I have researched this myself over the years, read Revelations, read different books on it, and that type of stuff, interpretations, visions from priests, nuns, and whoever over the years concerning this time period. The main thing that you're really going to need is food, and also medical supplies, because you have to supply yourself food for 7 years. And during that same time period, especially now, the possibility of a biological weapon being used against Christians during the end times is extremely high. So you are going to need first aid supplies. You are going to need antibiotics. You are going to need those painkillers and so on and so forth. But you really need to be prepared that during the tribulation time period, you won't be staying in your house. You're going to lose your house. If you stay at your house, you're going to get caught and likely killed. You might have to bug out to the woods. So you're going to have multiple locations that are pre-positioned supplies are at, so that you can disappear into the woods, into the mountains, into the swamps, wherever. And you're going to have the basic tools and materials you can start to put together a shelter, a concealed shelter, one that you're concealing from drones, from satellites, from aircraft, from people just walking through the woods. And you need to make sure you have as much food as you can store. Stuff that is long-term, will last a long time, and hopefully requires minimal preparation, but we all know that stuff's expensive. So, basic items: rice, beans, lentils, split peas, flour, sugar, salt, coffee. I'm still doing experiments with coffee inside caches. I actually have to pull another batch of caches from the ground in not too long here, and I'll be checking the coffee that I actually have in that, and that stuff will have been in the ground for, I think it's 4 years. We'll see what condition the coffee is inside the containers. I know at the 2-year mark, I pulled some caches out of the ground, gave the coffee to someone. They tried it. They said it was perfectly fine. So We'll do another experiment on that when I pull some caches out, see if the coffee that's put in the ground, it's already ground up, your normal coffee grounds, see if it'll last 4 years in the ground. A lot more temperature controlled. You're not going to have those huge temperature swings. It's going to be pretty even through the air, mostly on the cool side, and the cooler stuff is usually the longer it stays preserved. So, but something to think about, okay? We're all getting our tax refunds right now if you did things correctly last year with how much you earned and you weren't trying to cheat stuff. You should have some money that you can put towards either some more basics or items that don't require as much work. You may be able to afford this during the year. You only have so much cash on hand. Well, now you get a bit more cash. Maybe you can put it towards those pouches, those cans, whatever it may be. Another thing that I want to point out is the humanitarian daily rations, HDMs. Those are still on the market for $40 to $50 a case of 10. Each individual ration is supposed to be about as many calories as an MRE. So it's supposed to be between that 1,500 to about 2,200 calories inside that meal. You know, maybe think about those. Regular MREs are still ungodly expensive. For a case of regular MREs, you can get 2 to 4, depending on the MRE, 2 to 4 cases of those HDMs, those humanitarian daily rations. They are vegetarian meals, but guess what? If you are starving or you have people show up at your place, you've run out of the normal food. You can't get out because of the Black Death is going across the land. The plague is, striking down anyone who approaches the cities. You've used up the regular food. Well, you still got those humanitarian rations. Toss each person one a day. They may not like it, but they're still getting food inside them. They're still eating. And at that point, you're really not going to care what the hell it is or even what it tastes like, as long as it's still edible. Why do I say that? Because you still have a company out there you should avoid. I am talking ReadyWise, also known as Wise Foods. Stay away from their stuff. Go more towards Augustin Farms or Mountain House when it comes to freeze-drieds. MREs, for that, it really comes down to how you store them. Make sure they're stored in a temperature-controlled environment. Nice, even temps. You don't want it to go from freezing like 10 below during the winter to during the summer, the MREs are cooking at 90 to 100 degrees, which means don't put them in the attic. Don't put them out in the garage unless the garage is temperature-controlled. A basement on a shelf away from a window is the best place to put them. Or hide them in a crawl space off that basement that stays dry and it stays cool. Your MREs will last considerably longer then. There are lists online stating the optimal conditions for storing MREs, and it tells how long those MREs will last based on the temperatures they are exposed to. Look that stuff up and then go through, assess the ones that you already have to make sure they're still okay. So there you go. Not a lot of swearing on this one, just putting out some info, especially some updates as to where I have been. So I am still around. I plan on going nowhere. Cancer has not killed me yet, and you know what? It's probably going to be a long time before it will attempt to. But you never know. Tomorrow morning, I may not wake up. Who knows? But for everyone out there who has still stuck with me over the last month, I know I have lost subscribers. I have lost people off of the channel over on Telegram also because I haven't put out content. But all of you that are still around, thank you for being here. And hopefully I will start getting out a bunch of videos to you soon. I am waiting for some training aids to show up. I literally paid for some more training aids a month ago, and I am still waiting for them to show up in the mail. What are they? I'm not going to tell you yet. You'll find out when the videos on those training aids get uploaded after hopefully they show up. I really hope I wasn't screwed over on those purchases. Now, for all my engineer brothers across the Patriot and militia movements and everyone out there, always remember, essayons, let us try.